Hello, and welcome to Save Your Sanity Help for Toxic Relationships. I'm Dr. Rhoberta Shaler. I'm glad you're here. We're going to be talking about something so fundamental tonight. We're going to be talking about the 11 traits of emotional immaturity and things that you can clearly see that people demonstrate over and over to show that they do not have the capacity or the willingness to be emotionally mature. And as you're ticking these off, I want you to think about yourself and I want you to think about the people in your life that you're having difficulty with and how these may be traits that they have. Many times I talk about traits of hijackals, but what's underlying these things? We also need to understand that. And emotional immaturity is definitely one of the things that's underlying the behavior of these relentlessly difficult people that I call hijackals. So if you haven't been with me before, welcome. And if you're returning, I'm glad that you found value here and you returned. Know that you can always find me at forrelationshiphelp.com. forrelationshiphelp.com. And if you'd like to support the show, you can do that at patreon.com/saveyoursanity. patreon.com/saveyoursanity. So before we talk about the 11 traits of emotionally immature people, I want to give you an idea of the opposite. What does it mean to be emotionally mature? Because we want to be able to calibrate that in ourselves and others as well. And I got the inspiration for some of the things I'm going to talk about tonight from a book that is one that I value. It's called Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents, and it's by Lindsay Gibson. And it's a good take on helping you understand that. So I just giving you the highlights, some things that Lindsay had to say, and things that I have to say about these traits. So let's talk about emotional maturity, how we want to be. And a person who's emotionally mature is capable of thinking objectively and conceptually at the same time as sustaining emotional connection. So they can do two things at once. They can be fully present in their emotions and use their brain. That's a sign of emotional maturity. The brain has actually matured. Another sign of it is the ability to function independently as a human being on your own while still being able to retain emotional connections with people you care about. So I'm out in the world and I'm functioning independently. I am not needy. I am not afraid. I am not anxious. And I can still have those connections with people at home. And the things are not in conflict with one another. That demonstrates emotional maturity. And they can be direct. A person who's well, that's interesting. I have disappeared. I hope that you can hear me. That's important. So I will just hope that the camera picks it up again, but I'll keep on talking. So another aspect of emotional maturity is that they can explore what they want and keep going in life and have goals, and they don't have to exploit anyone. You're mature when you can do that on your own without having to exploit or manipulate or betray or manhandle someone. That's really important. And then they have a well-developed sense of self and they treasure their close relationships. That's also a sign of emotional maturity. They're comfortable and honest about their feelings. They have well-developed empathy and they are clear about keeping their impulse control in check. And they demonstrate emotional intelligence. Aren't these great sounding things that you really want people to have? I think they really are. And further to that, emotionally mature people are interested in other people's lives, and they're open to being emotionally intimate. They're not locked into themselves, but they can extend themselves to others. And they solve problems directly with people. They don't triangulate. They don't go behind your back. They do not engage in passive aggressive behaviors, but they are actually able to have this well-developed empathy and solve problems directly with the person with whom they're having problems. When you're emotionally mature, you're much better at handling stress. That's a big plus. And an emotionally mature person can control their emotions. Important things. So for us to understand what emotional maturity is, then we can look at what are the signs, the 11 traits that I'm talking about of emotional immaturity. Now, is any of this sounding like something you have heard, you have experienced, something that you may have heard before? Because that's quite important to recognize. That you may have not realized that these fall into emotional maturity, but you sure would have had the feeling, because you feel like you're dealing not with someone childlike and incapable. You feel like you're dealing with someone who's childish, and that you wonder, what is going on? Because I'm dealing with this person who is demonstrating childish behaviors. So if this sounds familiar to you, this will give you another framework for thinking about the lack of empathy and things that you find in a relationship with a relentlessly difficult person. And my definition of these people that I call hijackals is that they hijack relationships for their own intentions and purposes and to get their needs met, and then relentlessly scavenge the relationships, for power, status, and control. So once you couple that with these traits of emotional immaturity, you will see how very much it mimics the way most hijackals behave. That's why the topic is an important one this evening. So number one, and we all know this about our hijackal friends, is that they like to be the center of attention. And if they're not, they will redirect the attention and bring the focus back to themselves. So you may say, oh, I had a terrible day. And they say, oh, so did I. Or I'm feeling really good about this. Oh, well, you think that's something. Wait till I tell you what I did. And they're constantly redirecting back to themselves. That's a very, very big sign of emotional immaturity. The spotlight cannot be off me. I need to be the person that everybody is thinking about taking care of. Now, we can have compassion for the fact that at some point they maybe didn't have this in their life, or at some point they had it from a parent and they just want to keep having it. And that's what we call being entitled. So if someone was brought up in that way, they cannot see any good reason why they shouldn't be the center of attention, and will demand to be, and will make you wrong for not making them the center of attention. The second trait of emotional immaturity is they're not self-reflective. They don't stop and say, what am I doing here? Am I behaving appropriately? Am I giving as good as I'm getting? Am I demonstrating that I care about this other person? It's not on their radar. They're just not self-reflective. They can do something terrible to you and they won't stop and think about it. They just needed to do that because that's what they needed to do to get what they want. So they're not self-reflective, but they're very self-referential. So if I want it, I should have it. Doesn't matter about anybody else. And then C number one above, of course, because they want to be the center of attention. So being self-reflective would not be in their best interests at all. Number three, They can't manage life very well on their own. They don't know what to do. They don't have a playbook. They're not sure about it. So they tend to be either rigid or impulsive. So it has to be this way. It has to be this way. This is the right way. Very rigid. Don't talk to me about anything else. It has to be this way. It's the only way I know to go. Or they can be very impulsive. Well, I just feel like doing it, so we're going to do this. Doesn't matter the consequences. We're just going to do this. So they get fixated on one right way, and that right way is their way. And that's all they care about. And that is very much like a little child who wants to be fed. I want it now. I want only Fruit Loops, and I don't care about anything else. And I will kick the chair and throw away anything else that isn't like it. And I will make my needs want and known, because it has to be my way right now. So, our brain grows until we're 30 years old, and not much in the last 5 years, but it grows. And brain development is a very important thing for us to look at when we're looking at immature behavior, because up to the age of 5 or 6, there's certain things that we just can't see, we don't feel, we don't have the brain capacity yet to do it. And so when we meet someone who's emotionally immature, sometimes their behavior is very much like a little person's, very much. And so this rigid or impulsive stand that it has to be my way, you see that in little children, don't you? I want what I want when I want it, and I'll cry if I don't get it. And so it's a sign, obviously, of emotional immaturity. Very clear connection to ways in which they didn't mature. And you've often heard me say that if you scratch a hijackal, you'll get the emotional response of a 3 to 6-year-old or 7-year-old, because that's where they got kind of fixated in their emotional development. So you don't give them what they want, or you don't say or do what they want, even if you didn't know they wanted it, and they're throwing a tantrum. And so that relates to their emotional immaturity. The fourth trait is to go with what they want or what they feel is best in the moment. They're very clear about not only I want what I want when I want it, but it's what's going to soothe me. It's what's going to make sense to me. It's the only thing that makes sense that will make me feel like I'm okay. I got my way. And so it's very confusing, because that will change repeatedly. It will just continue to change. So when we're looking at this, we want to recognize that things that you would think that little children do or think, when you scratch a hijackal, you will find that they still do or think it, because they are emotionally immature. Now, number 5 is a no thought needed, is that they just don't manage stress well. They manage it poorly. They overreact. They get very emotional about stress. They lose their capacity to think with any kind of linear, rational thought. And they get lost in the stress of the moment. And so they then use that as, you must do what I want because I'm stressed. And they learn to point that out quite early on. And then you then become the person who's supposed to take care of them and to understand all the stress they're under, while they are creating more stress for you, but that doesn't matter. Just what emotionally immature people do. Or number 6, they go with how they feel at the moment and not with what's true. If I need to say this in the moment to feel better, or to do this in the moment to feel better, I'll do that. And if I want to do the opposite 2 minutes from now because it feels better, I'll do that. Haven't you ever had that experience dealing with a hijackal where they say something, this is how I feel, this is absolutely how I feel. And 5 minutes later, They say the opposite. Well, this is what I was feeling. And you say, but just 5 minutes ago, you said how you felt is the opposite of what you just said. What's their response? You don't listen very well, do you? It comes right back to the blame shifting that I've done an episode about. They cannot manage their emotions. They will not track in any rational, linear way when it comes to their behavior. So they manage stress poorly. They overreact. And how many of them ever apologize for overreacting? You're just simply supposed to realize that they were overstressed and make allowances for them. Another sign of emotional immaturity. And again, this number 6, that they go with how they feel, not with what's true. It's what feels good in the moment, what will meet their need in the moment, what will help them feel less anxious in the moment. And you're supposed to know that. Many times you're supposed to know that as though you're supposed to be a mind reader. And that becomes really clear as well. So let's do number 7. They get highly annoyed by people who don't see things their way. You know, that's I'm going to stamp my foot until you tell me it's all right or I'm right. They get very adamant about that you need to affirm that I am right. Even if I am totally wrong, you need to affirm that I am right. And if you don't see things my way, you have a problem. Of course, referred to earlier, they're not self-reflective, so therefore it couldn't possibly be them who has a problem. Is this sounding horribly familiar? If you're listening to this podcast, you may very well have a person in your life who behaves that way. And this will sound familiar to you because even though this is about emotionally immature people, hijackals are emotionally immature people. So the connection is very clear. And I'm certain that you're checking things off as I read these lists. Ah, yes, they're like that. Oh, that's so true. It's true. It just is true about people who are emotionally immature. So let's look at number 8. They are childishly self-centered, insecure, and anxious, even while pretending they're not. And they're always wanting to be seen as good and right. And they will be, again, adamant about that. They will exclude any form of logic or thought that would prove them otherwise. They will not accept your opinions because, after all, who do you think you are commenting on me? And it's not childlike. It's not like they're just coming across as not knowing better. They are childish because they've gone into their emotions and they're not getting what they want. And it doesn't look like what they want. And they're not feeling satisfied. And therefore, everything becomes, again, what? Well, your fault. Because you don't understand, you don't care, you are not going to take care of them. You're a terrible person because they are in their childish self saying, I want to be seen as good and right, and you have to affirm me and validate me as being good and right, even though you're sitting there thinking, you are bad and wrong. They will demand that you get on their side. So sometimes you'll find yourself agreeing with them just to get them to be quiet because you know it's an argument that will go on for forever. And you may find yourself just wanting to shut it down and you will agree with them. Well, all that does is make them do the behaviors more. So that's not a strategy that's going to really help you. So we have to be clear about how to deal with these things, which we'll talk about in another episode. But today is important to really understand what these traits are. How do they show up? Because they are predictable when we're dealing with difficult people. And difficult people are emotionally immature. So let's look at number 9, the 9th trait of emotional immaturity. They always focus on whether their needs are being met. Are you meeting my needs? Because that's your job. That's what you should be doing. You are here to meet my needs. And what goes along with that is emotionally immature people never accept criticism well. And you may not even have been intending to criticize them. You didn't even utter a breath that you would think was critical, but they're hypersensitive to criticism because they are always focused on whether their needs are being met at the moment. It's a very difficult thing to get your head around, that although there are two of you in the room, only one believes that they matter. And so their needs are paramount. Your needs, what needs? Why should you have any needs? You're just here to meet my needs. So that's the way it rolls with people who are emotionally immature. And they practice upside down parenting with their friends. They extend the upside down parenting that I spoke about in several other episodes. And upside down parenting is this, that a healthy parent realizes their task in life is to meet the needs of their children. A hijackal parent engages in upside down parenting. They honestly believe and act as though it is the child's job to meet the parent's needs. And when you get into a relationship with one of these people, you soon find out that they're going to stamp their little immature foot and say, "You're here to meet my needs. That's your job. You are to be focused on meeting my needs." Much like the upside down parenting model that hijackals engage in. So if you happen to have had a hijackal parent, you will recognize this right away, that you were supposed to run as fast as you can to meet the needs of your parents. They had no concept of the fact that you did not have the emotional capacity, you didn't have the experience, anything to meet their needs. They make you wrong for not meeting their needs. It's very confusing for children. It causes them to grow up too quickly. The burden of it on children is enormous. Children will miss chunks of their childhood development because they've had a hijackal parent who demanded that the child actually parents the adult. It's what we call parentification. They turn the child into a small adult parent. And then they make the children wrong for not being good at that role. It's very sad. Okay, and now we're at number 10. Emotionally immature folks, they just have no interest in facts or logic or history. It doesn't matter to them what is true. It just doesn't matter. It's what they want to feel is true, is what matters to an emotionally immature person. They have that need to feel what is true as though it is what is true. That's very confusing when you're in relationship with them, because you, as a healthier human, maybe have a grasp on what is true, and they're insisting that that's not right. And no amount of talking changes their mind. I'm sure you've experienced that. You could stand on your head and spit nickels for a decade, and it's not going to change the fact that they are going to refute the truth for their truth. And they're willing to argue about it for forever, about whose truth is more true. You've noticed that too. So important to note. Because you want to bring facts as proof or as a reason or as a complement to making a decision, and they are not interested in the facts, right? They just don't care about that. They don't care about logic. They don't care if they've made a statement 10 minutes ago and they're gone 180 on that statement now. They will just hold on to it. Feels true to me, therefore it must be true. And when you go to court with a hijackal to get a divorce or work on child custody or whatever, they're the masters of emotional facts. It's not what is true, it's what they feel is true. And then they say it as though it is a fact, that it isn't actually the case, which it isn't. And many times I've had the opportunity to talk to attorneys of my clients to say, watch out for emotional facts. In court, they like to say things like this: well, she's never had an interest in the children, so I don't know why we're bothering with having a hearing. She just doesn't care. Well, that causes the other party to jump out of her seat because she does nothing but care. But that would be very inconvenient. So in court, they kind of do this throwaway thing. Well, she never really cared about the children, and here's what I want, hoping that that emotional fact will stick in the mind of the judge, will stick in the mind as being true. And I always remind attorneys at that moment, say, just a minute, what do you mean she never cared about the children? Because you have to shine light on it right away, because if it's allowed to stand unchallenged in court, there will have been people who heard it and accepted it and took it in, even though they didn't focus on it, and they will have that as part of their construct of the case. So we have to be very careful. Again, a topic for another time, but it falls into the same emotional immaturity, that they are not about the facts or the logic or the actual history. They're in the convenient place of saying what I feel is true is the truth, and it bears no resemblance to what actually happened. If you remember that and you're going to court, mention that to your attorney so they can watch for that. All right, and the last one, number 11, trait of emotional immaturity. They are low on empathy. Lately, I've been talking to clients about the fact that those of us who are not hijackals live on the healthier human planet. And so we tend to expect hijackals to be like us. We treat them as though they're like us. That if I present a cogent argument, or I present the logic of a situation, or I present the historical facts, the other person will say, oh yeah, you're right, that's true. But you know very well that that's not going to happen when you're with a hijackal, because they are low on empathy. And so the ability to put themselves in your shoes, to see things from your perspective, why? Too much effort, who cares? It's all about me.com. So they're very low on empathy, and their emotional insensitivity makes them truly unable to be emotionally intimate. They just can't. And if you think about all the 11 things that I brought up in this broadcast, you can see why you can never have reliable emotional intimacy, if any real, authentic emotional intimacy, because they are so low on empathy and they're so emotionally sensitive to being wrong. So no matter what happened, what actually occurred, they will twist and warp and reshape and retell things so that it always makes them the hero or the victim, the one who has all the needs that are unmet, or the person who has done all these wonderful things for you. And why are you refuting what I'm saying? So we get into a clear understanding of what emotional immaturity looks like. Then we can go back to the way we opened this podcast this evening and remember what it is that is a sign of actual emotional maturity. And just to recap that, it's being capable of thinking about things out in the world, or historical or linear or factual things, while sustaining a deep emotional connection to other people. and having that ability to function independently and still keep that emotional attachment. Now, I did an episode recently on what healthy love is. And at the beginning of the definition, I say that healthy love is the conscious balance between autonomy and emotional intimacy. The conscious balance between autonomy, being self-governing, and choosing emotional intimacy. Well, if you don't have the capacity to think about another human because you are emotionally immature, you are not going to have the capacity for healthy love. And if you have not listened to that podcast, I highly recommend that you do. So I hope these distinctions have had meaning for you and that you recognize the situation as it really is, and also the fact that much of it will never, ever, ever change. Because that can change your decision making about whether you want to stay in the relationship or not. I have a new upcoming course and program that's called Executing My Exit, going from deciding to doing. And if that's going to be helpful to you, be sure to subscribe if you catch these podcasts on Facebook. Like the page if you catch them on YouTube, and subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you will know more about these programs, or go to my website for relationshiphelp.com, FOR relationshiphelp.com. So while you think about these familiar aspects of emotional immaturity, I hope that you will take very good care of yourself, because you're precious and you matter. We'll talk soon. Well, good evening, everybody, and thanks for hanging in. For some reason, my camera went off and I couldn't stop the broadcast in order to fix the camera. So let's see what people had to say. Hi, Michelle. Hi, Annie. Hi, Ekaterina. Great. It wasn't a simple matter of flipping the camera, unfortunately. It was that the camera stopped working. Hi, Danny. I haven't seen you post before. Welcome. I'm glad you think it's awesome. Yes, solve problems directly. That would be a grown-up thing to do, wouldn't it, Michelle? And they don't really do that. Oh, Sky, you've read the book. Great. So I encourage people to read that book. It's a good one. I'll just tell you the name of it again so that you can know. Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents by Lindsay Gibson. It's important for you to realize that if you have a hijackal in your life, you may have had a parent that had hijackal tendencies, and that will help you. Michelle says, redirecting back to themselves is how the hijackal mom hijacked my college graduation. Oh, that's such a good point, Michelle, because hijackals hijack every celebration, every accomplishment, every holiday because of that very reason. It has to be allaboutthem.com. So they'll either do it by coming and creating a scene or making you miserable, or by not coming and hoping that that will make you miserable. But they will hijack celebrations and they will take it right out from under you, because they cannot bear anybody else being the center of attention. So difficult. Hi, Isabel. Sky says, where there is pettiness, there's emotional immaturity. Absolutely. The inability to have the give and take of an emotionally intimate relationship or an emotionally equal relationship. And that's where you find the pettiness. You also find in that pettiness a person who is so emotionally immature that they cannot delay their gratification. They want what they want when they want it, and they demand it. And so that goes along with what you said, Sky. Hello, Linda. I haven't seen you post before. Welcome. Michelle says, what can we expect from hijackals in the context of no underlying disease disorder when they become senior citizens? Hijackal mom seems to regress at age 78 and is like a tween at 80? Well, it's a really good question. The research suggests, my experience is different, but the research suggests that hijackals continue to get worse until somewhere around 41 to 45. I have seen them get worse well beyond that, and then they just stay worse. So it's an important thing. But if there is any consciousness at all, they sometimes do what you're suggesting, Michelle, is they don't want to take responsibility for anything, so they start to go into shutdown. They don't want to talk about anything. They're too tired. They're too fragile. They'll tell you, don't you have pity for me because I'm elderly? I need to be taken care of. And so they will play some of those cards. Also, though, although you said no underlying disease or disorder, they will many times end up with having some forms of dementia, because sometimes this is not scientifically accurate, but I sometimes think that that's what happens when you spend your entire life trying to overthink and outthink every other human. Your thinking device goes off. But that's just me, and that's just me poking fun at it a little bit. But, it is a difficult thing. And if you've got no contact with the parent, and then these things start to change in later life, it really can cause you to have quite a decision to make. And it will play on your feeling of fairness and your own emotional maturity to think, I should be able to accommodate that. So it can be very difficult. I hope that helped, Michelle, answered your question or gave you an idea to ask another one. Michelle says, yes, it's horribly familiar what I was talking about. Isabel said, my mom lived till 95. She never changed. So much emotional abuse. I was her target. My brother is also a hijackal, and I was his target. Such a familiar pattern. My parents never changed either. My mother just kept getting worse. So I understand that. No matter what research says, maybe research did or didn't live in these relationships, but I certainly did. So I know what it feels like, and it feels like forever, that you can't believe it's getting worse, but it did in my case. Maybe you'll have the same experience. Isabel said, I ended 2 hijackal, quote unquote, friendships. Good for you. I've grown so much. It's all for growth and healing. Yes, and an opportunity to heal childhood wounds. Once you realize that you're with a hijackal and you have a hijackal partner, that's usually when the wake up comes, and you think, wow, this is incredibly familiar, which is why I talk about that all the time. And you start looking around, and if you had hijackal parents, of course you're going to be familiar with the feeling of being comfortably uncomfortable in the presence of another human. And you will just think, because that's the family you were in, that is the way life is. And then when you extend that thought to realize that, wow, I don't have the best friends here. I'm still looking for the approval of my friends, just like I looked for the approval of the hijackal parent. What am I doing? I'm going to give my head a shake. So it sounds like you had that moment, Isabel, and I'm so glad that you did. Because they do parentify us, that we should be taking care of them. And you're supposed to be the adult. If you have a hijackal parent, they expect you to meet their needs and take care of them. And it's all upside down, as I said. Isabel added, never knew about hijackals till after I left my family and realized I had to go. No contact to save my sanity. Good for you. Yeah, it's difficult, Isabel says, my mother was also loving, genuinely loving. Is dual possible? Well, it can be. People can have conditions as well as being hijackal where they flip-flop. right? People who have borderline tendencies will be like that. So the hijackal nature is the darker side, and the loving side comes out sometimes, and it is possible. It's very confusing, particularly confusing to a child, because the child wants to attach to a consistent mother figure or a consistent parent figure, and they get very confused. Like, I wanted to be loved, and I was loved, and now they want to hurt me, or they want to dismiss me, or they don't have time for me. So in that way, instead of being securely attached, and I'm going to do a show on attachment soon, instead of being securely attached, they become very insecurely attached. They can get very anxious about uh, where is that person? Why aren't they paying attention to me? Are they there? Do they love me? Do they care about me? And so when you're with somebody who has borderline tendencies, sometimes it feels like they love you, sometimes it feels like they hate you. And maybe your hijackal parent fell into that category a little more. That is quite possible. Yes, emotional facts are another form of alternative facts. Michelle says, I stopped agreeing with my hijackal mother 2 years ago. I started voicing my perspective and feelings. It was the beginning of the end. And now I'm looking at pressing charges for 2 years of domestic violence. I'm so sorry that it moved over into that realm, but I'm so happy that you're standing up on your back legs and saying, I am going to press these charges, because it is imperative to do that. They will never stop. Now, I know for some people it would be very unsafe and unsettling to press charges. That's why so many people have domestic violence incidents. They call the police come, the police say, I'll take this person away, and you're so afraid for the repercussions that you say, oh no, it's all right now. And then you get beat after the police leave. Very, very difficult. But I'm glad that you're standing up and saying, not on my watch and not happening to me. It is not something I'm going to tolerate nor experience again. So I am going to paint it red, expose it for what it is, and get it to change. So good for you, Michelle. Sky says, there can be no empathy if they have lost the self. They have no souls, and that's what they want, the souls of others. Well, I don't think I agree that they have no soul. I think everybody has a soul. But what they don't do is act from the empathy or compassion of a well-developed soul. So I certainly agree with the intent of what you said, but I think, I just don't think about the same way about souls. Michelle said, for 3 years, I thought my hijackal mom was getting dementia. She changed drastically in a short period of time. It turns out she's just an elderly hijackal who hid it and brainwashed me. Very disappointing, absolutely, and for sure. It's very, very difficult. You are very welcome, Michelle. I am here to help you, and I hope it changes your life for the better. It's a mission. I have been through it all, as most of you know, and I decided to make it the focus after I got my PhD in psychology, because nobody understood it when I complained about it. There was no help for me at all. I know that if you go to someone for help and they don't understand or make their specialty dealing with these difficult people, they can make you feel really wrong and crazy. So be careful for that too. Always go to someone for help when you need it, who specializes in these aspects of personalities, and preferably somebody who has experienced it as well, because it doesn't look the same from the inside as the outside, right, everybody? I'm sure you're all putting up your hands and saying, yes, that hijackals do paint that public picture of perfection, while at home they are providing a private place of pain. And so people don't see it. They don't believe it. And they'll tell you it's your fault, or tell you should have more compassion, or you don't have all the facts, and you just simply are denied your feelings. So be sure to go to someone who understands that if you're going for help. Jennifer says, my hijackal mother has terrible dementia. Well, I hope that her dementia, if she needs to suffer through that, is helping her forget and be unaware of how to be difficult and have hijackal tendencies. That's the most that we can hope for. But people who have severe dementia, first they go through the reduction in memories, and then after a while, as it continues and as that problem deepens, they can become quite violent. So it's important to recognize that these things happen. They happen to people who are not hijackals either, but to know what happens when they are a hijackal and they get dementia, because they don't change in the sense of their motivation, but they may forget a lot of things. Let's hope that they forget how to be quite so nasty. That's always a good thing. All right, what do we have here? Yes, the flip-flop of the hijackal. That's where we start to wonder about. Yes, they all flip-flop because they never want to be wrong, so they change their mind. But when I was talking about the flip-flop, I was talking about the idea of borderline tendencies. And that's what Isabel was commenting on. It's always confusing because you don't know who's going to show up in that body. Very difficult. Michelle said, I'm 47. I just connected the dots in the past 3 months. My hijackal mom has zero sympathy, even though I'm suffering from POTS and Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Yeah, well, I wish you well with the conditions, but I'm so glad that you realize the impact of the cause, which would have been, well, the cause of your distress, not necessarily connected to those conditions. But, when our nervous system is on high alert all the time, when our adrenals are being fatigued all the time because we've been on high alert all the time, when we have stress symptoms most of the time, it's exhausting and our bodies get worn down. It's always important to see that sometimes we have to stop thinking or heal in situations with these hijackals in order to physically heal our bodies. Michelle says, yes, fear and lack of resources keep us stuck in unhealthy and sometimes dangerous situations. It certainly is in our factors for sure. And that's why we have to unhook from a hijackal in a very slow way. That's what I have my clients do anyway. If you're ever wanting to be my client, you can go and use my new client opportunity, a full hour with me for $97. You find it at beaclient.com, BEA client.com. Michelle said, I was a psychology major and I never expected my mother was a hijackal. Yeah, well, that's the way it rolls because they're rarer and people don't talk about them much because you don't have a lot of impact on them when you're young, so you don't hear about it. Jennifer's talking about her mom with dementia. She doesn't recognize me as your daughter. She knows me, but there's no violence. Good. Well, I hope it stays that way because when the violence comes, it's very, very difficult for everybody. All right, let's see if there are any more questions here. Oh, Michelle said, I thought my hijackal mom was the way she is because she's a Gemini. Did she tell you that, or were you just hoping that it was her sun sign that was causing the duality in her? That's really interesting. The Geminis that have duality. That's well known that's the case, but let's not confuse them with being hijackals, because hijackals are in this realm without outside influence, have been trained to behave this way, or trained to think they need to behave this way, or in a very rare number of cases definitely are hardwired to be this way. So that's important to recognize. So it seems that we have yes, Michelle wrote, hoping. I think we've reached the end of our commentary on this topic tonight. I'm so glad you've been with me, and that you will come again. Bring your friends if you think they would find value here. Careful, Isabel, I'm a Scorpio. Just kidding. And invite your friends to come, because people can be, as you know, so very, very isolated in this. And if they just even want to sit down and listen as opposed to interact, of course, that's fine. And I hope that they will. And in the meantime, take very good care of yourself, because you're precious and you matter. Good night.